My daughter-in-law poured the coffee herself that Thanksgiving morning, which she had never done before in 12 years of holidays at my table. That was the first thing. She'd always let me host, always let me move through my own kitchen the way I'd moved through it for 31 years, knowing where the good mugs were, knowing the coffee ran strong from the third cup of the pot, knowing which drawer held the cloth napkins Harold had bought in Portugal the year before he got sick. She'd never offered to help with anything that couldn't be photographed. But that morning, she was already standing at the counter when I came downstairs, and she turned around with a smile that sat just slightly too high on her face. "I made it fresh, Mom," she said. "Sit down. You did so much yesterday." I sat down. I looked at the mug she set in front of me. I didn't drink it. I don't know exactly what stopped me. Maybe it was 32 years as a hospital nurse, watching people's faces when they were hiding something. You learn in that work that the body tells the truth even when the mouth doesn't. The way she kept glancing at the mug, the way my son came in from the living room 2 minutes later and looked immediately at my hands instead of my eyes. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe it was the fact that she'd never once made me coffee in 12 years, and people don't change their habits on a random Thursday morning for no reason. My granddaughter came downstairs at 8:30, still in her socks, hair pulled sideways from sleeping. She kissed me on the cheek, poured herself orange juice from the carton, and dropped into the chair across from me. 17 years old and the most honest person in the house. I slid my mug toward her without saying a word. "Can I have some of yours, Grandma? I don't like it strong." My daughter-in-law's head turned so fast I heard her earrings swing. "That one's Grandma's," she said. Too quickly. "I'll make you a fresh cup, sweetheart." My granddaughter looked at her, then looked at me. Something passed between us that neither of us named. She pulled the mug back toward herself. "It's fine," she said. "I already have juice." She didn't drink it either. 15 minutes later, my son said he felt like he needed some air. He went out to the back porch and stood there longer than made sense for a man who'd grown up in Ohio and always claimed he didn't feel cold. I watched him through the kitchen window, standing very still with his hand on the railing. He looked like a man waiting for something that wasn't coming. I spent the rest of that Thanksgiving cooking the meal I'd planned, smiling at the right moments, saying grace the way I always did. When my daughter-in-law laughed too loudly at her own jokes, I laughed with her. When my son topped off my water glass 3 times during dinner, I thanked him. After dessert, I hugged them both at the door and told them to drive safe on the way back to Columbus. Then I locked the door, turned off the porch light, and sat down at my kitchen table in the quiet. My hands didn't shake. I'd held the hands of dying patients without shaking. But something in my chest had gone very still, the kind of still that comes just before you make a decision you know you can't take back. I pulled out the yellow legal pad I kept in the junk drawer, the one I used for grocery lists and phone numbers, and I started writing down everything I remembered from the past 8 months. Every conversation that had felt slightly off. Every question my son had asked about the house, the pension, the accounts. The afternoon in August when my daughter-in-law had brought over paperwork she said was for a home warranty update, and I'd signed it at the kitchen table while she talked and talked about a vacation they were planning, filling all the silence so I couldn't think. The way she'd gathered up the papers immediately afterward, not leaving me a copy, saying she'd handle the filing. I wrote for an hour and a half. When I finished, I went to bed, but I lay awake until 2 in the morning, because somewhere in the back of my mind, a voice that sounded a great deal like 32 years of clinical judgment was asking me a question I didn't want to answer. What, exactly, had I signed? I'd been a charge nurse on a cardiac unit for the last 18 years of my career. I retired at 62, not because I had to, but because Harold had been diagnosed the year before, and I wanted to be the one taking care of him. I knew medications. I knew dosages. I knew what a therapeutic level of lorazepam looked like in a 180-pound man standing on a back porch in the cold, and I knew what 2 still hands and 2 slow blinking looked like in a woman sitting at her own kitchen table wondering whether her coffee had been tampered with. I didn't know for certain. I want to be clear about that. I never sent the coffee for testing. There was nothing left to test. My daughter-in-law had rinsed the mug while I was putting away the turkey platter. What I had was a trained eye, 12 years of watching a woman who never did anything without a reason, and a signed piece of paper I couldn't account for. The Monday after Thanksgiving, I called my attorney. Margaret Chen had handled Harold's estate and the refinance of the house 4 years ago. She was small and precise, and wore her hair in a bun that never moved, and she had the particular stillness of someone who had heard every variety of human problem and was not surprised by any of them. When I told her I might have signed something I didn't understand in August, she asked me to come in the next morning and bring anything I had on file. I brought the folder from the cabinet in the spare room, the one that held every important document from the past decade, organized by year. Harold had taught me that. Paper is memory, he used to say, and memory is power. The August document wasn't in the folder. I'd never received a copy. Margaret was quiet for a moment when I told her that. Then she asked me a question I hadn't thought to ask myself. Was my son's name currently on any of my accounts or property? I said I didn't believe so. She pulled up the county recorder's office database on her computer and typed in my address. She read the screen, then she read it again. There's a deed modification recorded on September 14th, she said. Your son's name was added as a joint tenant with right of survivorship. The room didn't spin. I'd been a nurse too long for rooms to spin, but something settled down very low in my stomach like a stone dropping into cold water. I didn't authorize that. The signature on file matches yours. She turned the monitor so I could see. My signature on a notarized document, adding my son's name to the deed of the house Harold and I had bought the year we got married. The house I'd planted the elm tree in front of. The house where both of my children had learned to walk, though one of them had apparently forgotten what it meant to stand on his own feet. The notary is someone named Philip Straw, Margaret said. I don't recognize the name. Do you? I thought about the August afternoon, the stack of papers, my daughter-in-law's voice filling every moment of silence. No, I said. Margaret closed the monitor and folded her hands. I want to be straightforward with you. Joint tenancy with right of survivorship means that when you die, the property passes directly to your son without going through probate. It also means he has legal standing to take certain actions regarding the property while you're still living. This is a significant change to your estate, and if you didn't understand what you were signing, we have grounds to challenge it. I looked out her window at the gray November street. What else might they have changed? I asked. She spent the next hour making calls. By the time I left her office, I knew that my son had also been added as a secondary account holder on my primary checking account added in October, 2 months after the deed. I had not done this. I had not been present at the bank when it was done. The authorization on file referenced a power of attorney document I had apparently signed in August, the same August afternoon, the same stack of papers. A durable power of attorney, broad authority. Finances, property, and decisions about my living situation should I be deemed unable to manage my own affairs. I'd worked 32 years in healthcare. I'd held the hands of patients whose families had stripped them of everything while they were still breathing, and I had filed the paperwork and called the social workers and done everything the system allowed me to do. I knew exactly what this document was designed to enable. I drove home the long way, past the park where I used to take the kids in summer. The trees were bare and the sky was the color of old tin, and I thought about my son at 22, the way he used to call me every Sunday from college just to talk. I thought about the man he'd married into becoming over the last 12 years, the way he'd stopped calling as often, the way his sentences had started ending with "we think" instead of "I think." I didn't hate him. I wasn't sure I even blamed him entirely, but I understood, sitting in that car on that gray November street, that love and intention were not the same thing, and that the road between them could be paved with paperwork. I went home. I made tea. I sat at the table with my yellow legal pad, and I wrote down everything Margaret had told me, in order, with dates. Then I called my granddaughter. She picked up on the second ring. She was at school, but she stepped into the hallway. I could hear the echo, and she listened without interrupting, which was more than most adults managed. I knew something was wrong, she said. When I finished, I've known for a while. They've been saying things about you. That you've been confused, that you left the stove on once and didn't remember. I've never left a stove on in my life. I know that. A pause. Grandma, there's something I have to tell you. I didn't know what to do with it before, but I think you need to hear it now. She took a breath. At Thanksgiving, before you came downstairs, I was already in the kitchen. I came down early because I couldn't sleep. My mom didn't see me. She was on the phone. I heard her say that by Christmas, things would be handled. That once you signed the next round of paperwork, the house would be clean. The kitchen was very quiet. She said that, word for word. I've been thinking about it since Thursday. Another pause. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I didn't want to believe it. You're telling me now, I said. That's what matters. After I hung up, I sat for a long time with the phone on the table in front of me. Then I picked it up again and called Margaret. Start the challenge process on the deed, I said, and I want a new power of attorney drawn up by end of week with my granddaughter as the sole designate. I also want the old one revoked in writing, today if possible. Done, she said. And the bank accounts? I'll handle the bank myself. The branch manager at First National was a man named Robert Akabe, who had the careful energy of someone accustomed to delivering unwelcome information. He pulled up my account with the same neutral expression he probably used for all of it, the inheritances and the divorces and the adult children who showed up with documents. He looked at the screen. He looked at it longer than was comfortable. There's been activity on the secondary authorization, he said. 6 transactions since October. The largest is, he paused, $4,200, transferred to an external account. Cancel the authorization. I need to flag that the authorization was established under a power of attorney we have on file. That power of attorney was obtained without my full understanding of what I was signing, I said. My attorney is submitting a formal revocation today. I'd also like the account flagged for in-person verification only. No transactions without me present. He nodded slowly, the way people nod when they're deciding whether to push back and conclude they won't. I can do that. I'll also print the last 12 months of statements for your records, please. When he slid the stack across the desk 20 minutes later, I took it home and read every page at my kitchen table, line by line, the way I used to read patient charts, looking for the discrepancy everyone else had missed. The $4,200, a charge at a home furnishing store in Columbus, a city I hadn't visited in 8 months. A recurring transfer of $600 a month since October, categorized as family support, which it was not. I added the numbers up in the margin. $19,400, not a rounding error, not a misunderstanding, a plan with a budget. I put the statements in a folder, labeled it with the date, and added it to the cabinet in the spare room where Harold had taught me to keep my memory. My son called that evening. I didn't answer. He called again the next morning. I let it go to voicemail. The message was careful and measured. He said he'd heard I'd been into the bank, that he was worried, that he thought maybe I was confused about a few things, and he'd love to come by and talk. The word confused appeared twice in 40 seconds. I noted that on the legal pad. My daughter-in-law texted an hour later. Mom, we're only trying to help. You've seemed overwhelmed lately. Let us come over this weekend. I set the phone down and went to the window. The elm tree Harold and I had planted in 1991 was losing its last leaves in the November wind, dropping them one at a time onto the front walk. I didn't reply to either of them. What I did the following Monday was call Adult Protective Services and file a report on my own behalf. I'd referred enough patients to know how the system worked, and I knew that creating a record before they did was the most important move I could make. I gave them the deed modification, the unauthorized bank activity, the power of attorney obtained under false pretenses, and a written account of the Thanksgiving morning coffee incident. I didn't characterize it. I just described what I had observed, the way I'd been trained. Factual, sequential, specific. The caseworker was a young woman named Dana, and she listened without once suggesting I might be misremembering. Margaret filed the deed challenge the same week. She also sent a certified letter to my son and daughter-in-law, signature required, outlining the revocation of the power of attorney and the removal of the secondary account authorization, and advising them in plain language that any further attempts to access my finances or property without my explicit written consent would be treated as financial elder abuse under Ohio law. I know what that letter cost them when it arrived. Not the money, but the moment of understanding that the plan had stopped working. I wasn't there to see it. I didn't need to be. 2 days later, they showed up unannounced. I saw the car from the upstairs window. I watched my daughter-in-law check her reflection in the side mirror the same way I'd watched people check their expressions before entering a patient room, arranging their faces into something softer than what was underneath. My son walked beside her with his hands in his jacket pockets, and for just a moment, at the end of my front walk, he slowed down and looked at the elm tree. Something in his face flickered. I noted it. I opened the door before they knocked. "Mom," my son stepped forward. "We need to talk." "You added your name to my house," I said. He blinked. That was it, was just a precaution, in case something happened to you. We were trying to protect. "You added your name to my house without my knowledge." My daughter-in-law smiled, the same smile from Thanksgiving. "Mom, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We love you. We're your family. We're worried about you, that's all. Maybe we could come inside and—" "My attorney has already filed to have the deed modification reversed," I said. "The bank has been notified. The power of attorney has been revoked." I looked at her. "Whatever was in that coffee on Thanksgiving, I want you to know that I didn't drink it." The smile dropped. Not all the way she caught it, but I saw it go. "I don't know what you're—" "I do," I said. "And so does my attorney. And so does the county recorder's office. And so does the branch manager at First National, who printed me 12 months of unauthorized transactions." I took a breath. "You can go. Please don't come back without notifying me in advance." My son said my name, just once. There was something in his voice. I recognized the sound of a man who had told himself a story about his own intentions for so long that he'd forgotten the story wasn't true. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "I'll be here when you're ready to be honest," I said. "But I won't be available before then." I closed the door. The weeks that followed were the quietest I could remember in a long time. The good kind of quiet. I started going to the community pool again, something I'd let slide while Harold was sick and never picked back up. I walked every morning. I called my sister in Phoenix on Thursdays. I had dinner twice with my neighbor Carol, who made a lamb stew that Harold would have loved. My granddaughter drove out from school the third weekend in December, just to spend a Saturday with me. We made Christmas cookies the way I'd taught her when she was 5, with the same cutters Harold's mother had left me, the star and the bell, and the crooked little tree that had always come out lopsided no matter who was cutting. She was quiet for most of the afternoon, working the dough with her hands, and at some point she said, without looking up, "Mom's not happy." "I know. She keeps saying you're out of your mind, that you had a breakdown. What do you think?" She looked up then. "I think you're the sharpest person I know." She pressed the star cutter into the dough. I told her that. I looked at this girl, her grandfather's steadiness, and something entirely her own, and I felt something in my chest that had been tight for months loosen a little. "I'm putting the house in a trust," I said. "You're named in it." She went still. "Grandma, not now. Someday, when the time comes. Your grandfather and I built something here, and I want it to go to someone who understands what it cost." I paused. "Someone who knows the difference between love and leverage." She didn't say anything. She just came around the counter and hugged me the way she used to when she was small enough. That hugging me meant wrapping her arms around my waist and pressing her face against my side. She was 17 now, and nearly as tall as I was, but she did it anyway. We baked for another 2 hours. The lopsided tree came out lopsided again. We ate it first. The trust documents were signed in January. Everything clean and specific, drafted word by word with Margaret's help, and read twice before I touched a pen. My granddaughter as primary beneficiary, a provision that any contest to the trust or challenge to my competency would automatically void my son's inheritance claim, which was modest but real. Margaret raised an eyebrow at that clause. "It's direct," she said. "So am I said. I drove home in the first real snow of winter, the roads quiet and white, the elm tree in front of the house already wearing 2 inches of snow on every branch like something deliberate. I made tea when I got inside the good chamomile, from a sealed box I'd bought at the grocery store myself. I sat in Harold's chair by the living room window the way I sometimes did when I needed to feel close to him, and I drank it slowly and watched the snow come down. I thought about my son, about the boy who used to call from college just to tell me about his week, about the man he was now, and the woman who had shown him how to mistake calculation for love. I didn't hate him. I missed him, or I missed who he'd been before he forgot that I was a person and not a resource. If he ever found his way back to himself, I'd be here. But I wasn't going to hold my breath, and I wasn't going to leave the door unlocked. February came. A letter arrived, handwritten, postmarked Columbus. I recognized my son's handwriting before I turned the envelope over. "Mom, I know you're probably not ready to hear from me. I'm not sure I'm ready to write this. I've been doing a lot of thinking about the last year, and I don't like what I see when I'm honest with myself. What we did with the house wasn't right. I told myself it was for you, but I don't think I actually believed that. I don't have an excuse. I just wanted you to know I understand why you did what you did. I'm not sure what to ask for. Maybe nothing right now. I love you. I know that doesn't fix anything." I read it twice. Then I put it in the cabinet in the spare room, behind the deed challenge documents and the bank statements and the power of attorney revocation, not to keep his words in the way you keep a wound open, but because he was right, it didn't fix anything. Not yet. And I needed to hold the whole picture together in one place so I could see it clearly. Memory is power. Harold had known that. I didn't write back. Not yet. There was time. There was a great deal of time, as it turned out, and I intended to spend it carefully. Spring came early that year, the way it sometimes does in Ohio when winter makes up its mind to leave before it's finished. The elm tree put out its first leaves in March, weeks ahead of schedule. I stood on the front porch one morning with my tea and watched the neighborhood come awake. A man walking his dog, 2 kids waiting for the school bus, Carol waving from across the street. The light was the particular gold of early spring, the kind that makes everything look like it's being seen for the first time. I thought about the Thanksgiving morning coffee and the August afternoon and the signed paper I hadn't read. And I thought about all the ways I had let things slide for so many years, telling myself it was love, telling myself that suspicion was the opposite of family. But I had been a nurse for 3 decades, and one thing you learn in that work, if you learn nothing else, is that seeing clearly is not a betrayal of love. It is the highest form of it. You cannot help anyone, patient, husband, grandchild, stranger, if you refuse to look at what is actually in front of you. I had looked. Late, but not too late. That mattered. My granddaughter called on Sundays now, every Sunday, like clockwork. She was applying for colleges. She wanted to study biomedical engineering. She asked my opinion on her application essays, and I gave it honestly, specifically, the way I used to give feedback on nursing students' care plans, noting what was clear and what was missing and what deserved more room to breathe. She was extraordinary. She did not yet know how extraordinary, but she was beginning to find out. On a Tuesday morning in April, I turned 65. I made my own cake because I enjoy it. and because there is nothing lonely about doing something you're good at. Carol came over in the afternoon with a bottle of Prosecco and a plant she'd grown herself, a deep purple African violet that she said would do well in my kitchen window. My neighbor Walter, who had a sharp mind and too much time on his hands, brought a chess set and beat me once before I beat him twice. Margaret called to say happy birthday. My granddaughter called from school and sang, entirely off key, and made me laugh until I had to put the phone down. That evening, after everyone had gone, I sat in Harold's chair with the last of the Prosecco and the room quiet around me. The African violet was on the kitchen windowsill where Carol had set it, catching the last of the evening light. The trust documents were in the cabinet, in the spare room. The deed to the house was back in my name alone. The accounts were clean and watched, and mine. I talked to Harold the way I had started doing in the past few years, not because I thought he could hear me, exactly, but because the habit of telling him things had outlasted him, the way good habits tend to. I kept it, I told him, every last bit of it. I could almost hear him laughing, like I had any doubt. Outside, the elm tree moved in the spring wind. The streetlights came on one by one down the block. Somewhere down the street, a dog was barking at something ordinary. I finished my Prosecco, washed the glass, put it in the rack. Then I turned off the lights, went upstairs, and slept better than I had in over a year. I was 65 years old. I had built a life, watched it threatened, and taken it back piece by careful piece. I had done it without rage and without performance and without waiting for anyone to rescue me, because I had been a nurse for 32 years, and I knew that the person most reliably present in a crisis was yourself. I wasn't finished, not even close. Tomorrow I'd wake up early, drink my coffee standing at the kitchen window like I always did, and then I'd do whatever came next, the pool, the walk, the phone call, the small ordinary moves of a life that was entirely, completely, irreversibly mine. That was everything. That was enough.